Let's begin by telling you that organized labor, comprising the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress, have submitted a fresh proposal to the federal government of Nigeria, demanding 615,000 naira as a new minimum wage for workers in the country. According to a source who was a member of one of the subcommittees set up by the government to work on getting a new minimum wage for the country, the 615,000 naira monthly was reached after consultations by the NLC and TUC. President Bola Tinubu, through Vice President Kashim Shettima, had on January 30th set up a 37-member panel at the Council Chamber of the State House in Abuja, with its members cutting across federal and state government, the private sector, and organized labor. The panel was tasked with recommending a new national minimum wage. And to unpack these, I'm joined by business and social policy analyst Kenneth Ikenwa. Good afternoon. Glad to have you join me.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me on.
Now, let me start by asking you what you make of this 615,000 naira being proposed by the organized labor to the federal government.
Well, I'll start by saying it's a wonderful proposition, but a proposition being wonderful doesn't translate to it being realistic. It's very important that the Nigerian Labour Congress, which I vehemently support, should look at the economic realities on ground and play their own role in helping to redirect the ship, the alien economic ship of Nigeria, into the right direction with proper perspectives. So it started with 200,000. At the point it got to ₦1 million, and now it's back to 615,000. It is not economically pragmatic, in as much as the Nigerian Labour Congress prides itself as a catalyst for macroeconomic populism. I do not think that this is realistic. We have looked at this some time ago, and we have tried to set a tune or a target or a range, given the almost 200% increment in prices of goods and services and other things and amenities that Nigerians do enjoy, irrespective of the region. We would have thought, and I have advised, that at least the new minimum wage should range between 90,000 and 150,000. Because you have to put in a lot of factors, and the kind of the fact that the Nigerian economy is highly segregated across different sectors and different classes. We have to look at this and ensure that we're not, frustrating the government that is already frustrated and also frustrating Nigerians, and make sure that whatever is being asked for is realistic and we're very pragmatic.
Well, but when you say recommendations given for the new minimum wage should be between 90 to 100,000, I mean, some persons will say that, does not even meet the purchasing power with the present reality of Nigeria. Talk about the, escalating prices of goods and services, inflation jumping now to about 32.2%. So people will say, some persons will say that's not even worth it when you look at the purchasing power of the average Nigerian.
Well, the purchasing power parity is even going to go worse, because as of today, this morning, the National Bureau of Statistics has released a figure that says inflation has jumped from about 29% to now 33.2%. So I do not know if we should expect things to get better, but we need to really face the challenges on ground. We need to divide the country into different stratas and understand that what somebody that works at a level of maybe 10 or maybe 7 in the civil service may not necessarily be the requirements of somebody that is on a level 17 or a level 18. But we also need to put together, the entire working class of Nigeria and ensure that whatever is being asked for is something that can be met with in other sectors outside the civil service, at the state level, at the federal level, and the local governments. Now, you need to understand, and we also need to understand as Nigerians, that the largest employment of labor in Nigeria is actually the informal sector and the small and medium scale enterprises. So if you're asking for an astronomical 400 or 500, 600% increment in the minimum wage, I think that will be belaboring the gains that we're expected to be making with subsidy removal, and that will be putting much more on the employers of labor. I honestly believe that 615,000 is not realistic. I think, and I stand by what I've said last month on this platform and on this channel, that between 90,000 and 120, 150,000 seems to be more realistic. And how did I arrive at that figure? When you look at the staple food that Nigerians actually do eat, which is bread, the average price of a loaf of bread now is 1,500. I was in Sangwater over the weekend, and I heard that the average loaf the average price of a loaf of bread in Sangwater is 1,700. Now, for a family of a husband and wife, or husband and wives and 4 children, given our polygamous culture, for a family of 6, they would need about 2 loaves times 6 times 30 days, that's 60,000. And then you look at other living expenses. So I think that bringing it to about 90,000 or about 200,000 increments in what actually did exist before will be very realistic, considering the fact that the price of PMS has gone up by about 200%. It would just be a complete correlation, a perfect correlation to increase the minimum wage by at least 200%, or between 150 and 200% going forward.
Yeah, just to chip in there, Kenneth, I know you talked about the impact of these, affecting employers of labor. You also mentioned these would erode the gains made by the removal of subsidy. But then what other impact will this have on Nigeria as a whole, if implemented?
Well, the increment in the minimum wage in Nigeria is usually not income elastic. And what does that mean? It means that when there is this news about the increment of the salaries of workers, people in the market forget that this actually affects those in the federal service, those in the federal civil service, in the state, and hopefully in the local government civil service structure. And the private sector is expected to join in, which sometimes out of the lack of proper structure do not actually follow suit with whatever the government recommends. Now, what that will mean is that there will be more money coming into the Nigerian economy, and more money chasing fewer goods will translate to inflation. And this inflation can come in various forms. It could be hyper, it could be shrink inflation, it could be other forms of inflation that will reduce the quality of life of the Nigerian people. So we need to be well advised. The government is well advised with this intervention, and I expect much more from the Nigerian Labour Congress to be properly and better and perfectly advised on how to go about this. Asking for too much at this point in time will have terrible negative external economic effects and terrible multiplier effects on the Nigerian economy. So I think asking for what has just been adjusted by the removal of subsidy, which has brought untold hardship upon Nigerians, should be commensurate if we're asking for a proper wage increase.
Well, I wish we had more time to talk about this, but thank you so much for your insight on the news. Kenneth Ikenwa, business and social policy analyst. Thank you once again.
Always my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Let's also tell you that Nigeria's inflation rate surged to a new high of 33.2% in March 2024, a 1.5% point increase from February. This marks a slower month-on-month rise compared to February, but a significant 11.16% increase year-on-year. Food prices remain a major driver, reaching 40.01% inflation, driven by rising costs of staples like garri, yam, and millet. Urban areas were hit harder, with inflation reaching 35.18% year-on-year compared to 31.45% in rural areas. Core inflation, excluding volatile items like food and energy, also rose significantly, reaching 25.90% year-on-year in March. And to unpack this, I'm joined by Chief Economist, SPM Professionals, Paul Alaje. Good afternoon. Glad to have you join me. Mr. Alaje, could you please unmute?
Yeah, good afternoon, and thank you so very much for having me.
All right, fantastic. Now, many analysts predicted 32% inflation rate for March, but here we are, 33.2%. Did you see this coming?
What was true for many of us who are economists and who are following up with the development was that inflation was going to increase at an increasing rate, which means inflation will be worse off than what we have it today. But to be specific, nobody saw 33.2%, which means for money you have last year, you would have lost 1/3, not because the money is missing your bank account, but in terms of what the money can buy, 1/3 of the value would have clearly disappeared. So we didn't see, to answer your question clearly, nobody saw up to that increase in prices. But unfortunately, it has happened. And I know many people will say, oh, but dollar has improved. Why do we still have inflation? Oh, the value of naira to dollar is improving. Why is prices not adjusting? The truth about economics is that prices are sticky when it comes to reversing. But when it's progressing, it's sporadic. So we might not see the increase, we might not see the change in near term. It might take as much as 6 months to 9 months before you start seeing major difference. Recall that when President Tinubu declared subsidy is gone, the impact was not immediate, even though we started seeing the impact on the petrol station started coming immediately. But the overall effect took time. It took between 4 to 6 months before we started seeing it, you know, in other things. Unfortunately, Central Bank at that time also floated in Naira 15th of June. So we have two major impacts on pricing. Now we are seeing one of them relax, even though it's not up to where it was when President Tinubu got to office. Parallel market when President Tinubu got to office was around 800. Today, parallel market is around 1,000, 1,050 in most places. So food prices is a clear driver of this inflation. It continues to take the forefront of the inflation numbers at over 40%. What does this mean? It means that perhaps we are not having sufficient food or distribution of food has been hampered. The solution is in the problem.
Yeah, before we go to the solution, Mr. Alaje, just to chip in there, does this speak to the ineffectiveness of the CBN's monetary policy stance, or is there something else to blame for this sticky inflation?
Well, I'll tell you that the CBN will eventually, I cannot say the policy of CBN is not making any impact, because if there is no curtailing money supply, things could be worse off. But do I also think that to continue to adjust NPR upward is the solution? The answer is in capital letter. No. I have warned vehemently after the last 200 basis points to make it 600 basis points increase within 1 month, that is within 4 weeks. If Central Bank makes another 400 basis points, the Nigerian economy should be preparing for a recession in the next 3 to 4 quarters. If we continue to increase NPR, because it has implication, NPR increase without the overall economic performance, especially when growth is very volatile, will lead to a recession. In 2015-2016, similar policy was made. In fact, it was at a time when Naira started improving under Godwin Emefiele. Unfortunately, shortly after that, Nigerian economy went to a recession, not because local economy was prepared, but because there was global oil crisis. You have seen what is going on between Israel and what's it called, Iran. You've seen that Iran has launched over 300 missiles and ballistic equipment into Israel. If Israel retaliates, God forbid, if it extends to 2, 3, 4 more countries, what do you think will happen to the movement of goods around the sea? What will happen to Nigerian growth? Do you think we'll be able to survive this in the reality of what is going on? Just last week, America, the Fed, that Federal Reserve in America, hinted that it may further increase interest rates. If it does, foreign investors that Nigeria would have attracted would prefer to go back into such economy to invest their money. So why have I said all of this? The real solution to solving our problem is not going to come to shortcut of just adjusting NPR. Our inflation problem is beyond money supply, even though money supply is a component, and economic theory. Economists will tell you it's just money supply. But as a realist, and as someone who have studied beyond just the theories of economics, we have also studied applied economics as a course. In applied economics, you need to disaggregate the numbers coming from the National Bureau of Statistics. So what should that tell us? We need to do something about food supply. Our real challenge in Nigeria is the supply side. You have seen what is happening to dollar. Even though I've mentioned to your colleague that this solution is not, it's momentary, and this solution is going to be short-term, maximum medium-term. Emefiele tried it, was medium-term. Sanusi Lamido tried it, it was medium-term. Soludo tried it was medium-term. There's none of them that was able to translate it to long-term or permanent. You know why? Even during Soludo supply of dollar, Emefiele till now is supply of the supply side of FX is really narrowed. So inflation, I believe, with the effect of this money supply, will reduce. But would that mean that we have solved the problem? The answer will be no.
Let me just come in there quickly, Mr. Paul, Mr. Alaje.
And that money supply, we throw many into hunger, we throw many into out of job, we throw many into poverty.
If I may,
and
Mr.
I can
Alaje,
tell you, with the interest rate government is charging now,
yeah,
it's
just a moment,
deal.
Mr. Alaje. Apologies for butting in. You talked about a couple of things. You talked about aggregating the numbers and the need to shore up supply. If you could just break it down. When you say shore up supply, What in clear terms do you mean?
Okay, so what it meant is everything that can help us improve our earning in FX. That will mean our productive capacity, our ability to secure our crude instead of almost half of those or 1/3 of those being stolen within the Niger Delta region. We need to do something to secure that crude, the barrels of crude as we have them, we're selling them, and the money is getting directly to the central bank. That will solve some of the problems. 3, when FX come to Nigeria, can it go directly to the Central Bank of Nigeria? All of these will improve supply that can monitor, and all of this will go to our foreign reserve. Now, all of this will still not be the ability to produce, our ability to extortion, which is inflation, 40%, what is about 40% of the same is food inflation. So if you are able to change the structure of our agro system from this peasant farming or individual person, whosoever is interested, we go farming, so one that is a majorly private sector, then we can, because of Gary you mentioned, what our output will be in paddy, because of rice you mentioned, what our output will be in maize, because we need corn, then we can now project and look at what the future will be. We can also look at poultry because the price is increasing. How do we increase supply? When supply increases and demand remains the same, you can be guaranteed that prices will be fixed. That is what I expect those in authority to look at. Partnership, of course, with private sector. Expand supply side, then you're going to see the system stop. Unfortunately, or maybe I should say, fortunately, whichever suits anyone in the conversation, is that our population growth rate seems to be steady at over 2%. So if you have over 2% population growth rate and you have your supply side or your productivity low, then how do you then say your economy will grow? It's really going to be very challenging and difficult.
Well, thank you so much for your expertise on the news. Paul Alaje, Chief Economist, SPM Professionals, thank you once again. Thank you for staying tuned. Nigeria plunged into darkness early Monday morning after the national electricity grid collapsed at approximately 2 a.m. Data from the Transmission Company of Nigeria, TCN, indicates zero power generation from all 4 generation companies at a time. The blackout impacted a significant portion of the country, with 7 out of 11 electricity distribution companies receiving zero load allocation. Only Ikeja, Benin, Abuja, and Ibadan DisCos received minimal power, while the TCN has yet to officially confirm the collapse. It would mark the 6th such incident this year, adding to the nation's ongoing electricity woes. This comes on the heels of a recent hike in tariff for certain customers group, sparking mixed reactions from the public. In the meantime, the federal government of Nigeria has appealed to members of the National Union of Electricity Employees not to down tools over the recent tariff hike. The appeal follows the union's determination to withdraw their services should the government fail to rescind its decision on the removal of subsidy on the tariff payable by Band A customers. The Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission had on April 3rd raised the electricity tariff for customers enjoying 20 hours of power supply daily. Customers in this category were said to be under the Band A classification, and the increase raised their tariff to 225 naira per kilowatt hour from 66 naira per kilowatt hour. Let's also tell you that heightened security measures are in place across southwest Nigerian states in response to recent events, as authorities have bolstered security around key government installations, aiming to prevent any attempts to disrupt law and order by groups pushing their agendas. Security agencies have issued stern warnings, emphasizing their resolve to clamp down on any form of insecurity. They caution individuals claiming affiliation with the Yoruba Nation's agitation to choose the path of peace or face the consequences. This announcement comes after an alarming incident on Saturday where separatist Yoruba Nation agitators made an audacious attempt to seize the Oyo State Government Secretariat in Ibadan. Reports indicate that the agitators, dressed in army camouflage and armed with rifles, sought to raise their flag at the Oyo State House Assembly premises. However, swift action by security agencies led to the arrest of 20 individuals involved in the attempt. About 10 years ago, 276 schoolgirls were abducted from a government secondary school in Chibok, a town in Borno State, Nigeria. While some of the girls escaped captivity on their own, others were released following intense campaigning efforts from different governmental and non-governmental organizations. While 91 girls remain in captivity, there are more than 1,400 children who have been abducted in subsequent attacks. Our correspondent Bettina Onwili has details.
On the night of the 14th of April 2014, 276 female students aged 16 to 18 were kidnapped by the Islamic terrorist group Boko Haram from the government secondary school in the town of Chibok in Borno State, Nigeria. 10 years later, some of the girls are still yet to regain freedom from their captors. Some survivors of the incident have indicated their displeasure at the fact that some of their mates are yet to come home.
My biggest wish is for government to work hard to bring out my sisters. It's only my sisters I want right now.
For some of my colleagues that are still in captivities, they should stay still, they should stay strong, they should hold God. One day, one time, they will be released like us too.
Almost 3 years. All of us in tears because of the girls. Every night I do kneel down and hold her picture on prayers. After the release of Comfort, I was grateful and I was happy. But the happiness is not all that full because of the remaining of her colleagues. Till today, about 82 are nowhere to be found.
Nigerian activist Yemisi Ransom Kuti has emphasized the need for state policing, saying it would help address some security challenges. However, sources say that 18 of these girls have been killed, bringing the number down to 73 still in captivity.
Demand for state police, which will be a preventive measure for future occurrences. We want the police to be closer to the citizenry, to be able to police their communities effectively because they come from those areas and they are part and parcel of the communities.
Those that have come back, and Grace Dauda, who is here, mentioned it, that some of their colleagues have died. So they either saw them being shot or they were part of the proceedings to bury them while they were in captivity. But the government has not formally acknowledged that. So as a movement, we always say all of them. Because until the government comes out to formally tell the parents that X person is not coming back, we will still keep demanding for all of them.
One cannot begin to imagine how heart-wrenching it is for the family and friends of the Chibok girls yet to be released. Abducted as kids, some have now become mothers and wives to their abductors. Nigerians want to see more effort being put into bringing the girls back home safely and even more effort to avoid a repeat occurrence in the country. In Lagos, for News Central, Bettina Nwili.
In the meantime, members of the Chibok community in Borno State, northeastern Nigeria, have called for the return of all rescued Chibok schoolgirls still in the custody of the state government to their families. They accuse the Borno State government of keeping the girls with repentant Boko Haram members and denying their families access to them. Idong Joseph reports.
It's exactly 10 years since the sad and unfortunate kidnap of over 276 secondary school girls from Chibok in Borno State, northeast Nigeria. While about 194 girls have so far been rescued, with 82 still remaining in captivity, members of the Kibako community have expressed disappointment over government's inability to effect their rescue.
Within this time, 48 parents have lost their lives, mostly due to heart conditions and other health-related reasons. 3 parents have been killed in subsequent Boko Haram attacks in Chibok and have been victims of vitriolic campaigns aimed at dissuading us from pursuing the cause of our daughters.
Many families from the community say they are yet to find closure and want the government to come out clean on those who they say they have information that have died in captivity.
As witnessed and established by their classmates and friends while in captivity. There's no dodging the bullet here. 2 of the parents have since gotten the news of the passing of their daughters.
They accused the Borno state government of rehabilitating the rescued girls with the Boko Haram terrorists, urging them to reunite the girls with their families. They also called for the 2014 General Sabo Fact-Finding Committee report on the Chibok incidents to be made public.
We demand a formal rebuttal and apology to all the families and the community at large for the illegal cohabitation encouraged by the Borno state government by calling the tourists their husbands.
Immediately publish and disclose the facts and findings, all investigation panel reports that have been carried out on the abduction of our Chibok girls.
Community members here have accused the government of keeping the community under siege on the pretext of ensuring adequate security. And they say security operatives have continuously denied the public access to the community, a situation they find discomforting. In Abuja for News Central, I am Idonk Joseph.
And still on Chibok girls' abduction, residents of Chibok community have raised concerns over the scarcity of clean water in the town as the town marks a decade since the tragic abduction of schoolgirls by Boko Haram insurgents. Our correspondent Umaru Kirawa, who transversed Chibok community, tells us more.
Access to clean water has been a daily struggle for many families in Chibok town. Grace Dauda and her friends await their turn to use the hand pump to push out water to meet their needs and that of their children.
Roko kullum muke a gare su. Chibok kan muna da matsalar ruwa sosai. Yanzu mu da kanmu haka da muka zo tun da yara suna gida ma bamu samu ruwa ko abinci bamu iya mun yi ba.
Idan an yi shi sai a tsaya hanya, in an yi shi a tsaya hanya wanda ya lalace kuma ya kamata a gyara shi. To ka gani shine abin da ake so. To amma ba an ya lalace ma to ba a so a gyara.
Kawai da Allah taimake mu. Kaga yanzu dam nan yayi kusa ya kare. Idan ya kare dole sai dai a ringa tafiya mu ruwa. A je a dauka a kawo a cikin garin nan. In ba haka ba ba zai yi ba a nan garin. In dan ya kare nan. Kudin abincin kama ba za ka samu da wuri wallahi.
The town of Chibok has become symbolic not only for the tragedy it endured, but also for the resilience and strength of its people.
Kaga pompo ma ana ini ana kwana akai kowane lokaci. Yana hana yara zuwa makaranta don ba za a yi musu abinci ba. Dabbobi ma har ba sai su samu jiki suna rami har wayansu ma suna mutuwa.
To ruwan nan muna in mun ɗeba muna sai da 400-300 amma kuma muna samun ruwan nan da wala. Ini kullum ina samu 3,000.
The government have provided hand pumps for the water, boreholes in some areas. Although these initiatives have positively impacted the community, the scale of the problem seems to require a broader systemic solution.
Gaskiya zamana Chibok yanzu ya kai shekara 60 kaga ban taba ga isheshe ruwa ba. Ina roko gwamnati Nigeria ko na Borno ko wani gwamnati dai da kuma organizations dai in za su taimaka su yi mana ruwa sosai don mu samu ruwa isheshe a kowane lokaci a wannan kasa.
Kenan daga nan har 12 dare zaga mutane. Kuma pump guda ɗaya ne. Nan da ya ga guda ɗaya ne. Sai kuma can ba lalle ya ishe mu bane. Idan gwamnati za su iya taimaka mana gaskiya su taimaka mana. Muna buƙatar ruwa na ire sosai.
The Chibok community's struggle for improved water supply is a reflection of their resilience in the face of adversity. As they mark the 10-year anniversary of the abduction of over 200 of their girls, though many have returned, but dozens are still in the hands of the abductors, they continue to push for a better future, at least in having clean water. In Chibok for News Central, Umaru Kirawa.
Israel has vowed to exact a price from Iran in retaliation for the large-scale aerial assault on Israel this weekend. Analysts say they expect Israel to respond. However, the timing and the extent of that retaliation remains in question. On Saturday, Iran launched more than 300 drones and missiles against military targets inside Israel in what U.S. President Joe Biden has described as unprecedented. According to Israel's government, it's aware that the country is currently enjoying international support and goodwill from its allies and does not want to squander that. At the same time, they recognize that it cannot allow Iran's first attack on Israeli soil to go unanswered. And to dissect this, I'm joined by Roland Marks of Israel broadcast journalist. Good afternoon from here. Glad to have you join me.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Just paint a picture for me of what the mood is like there in response to these incidents of attacks by Iran.
Well, as you can imagine, we were very tense going into the weekend. We knew that there was an impending attack by Iran. What it would look like, we didn't know. However, when the Sabbath ended on Saturday night, we were informed by the IDF Homefront Command that there would be an attack, that Israel was going on an emergency footing. Now, where I am, we prepared our shelters. Most homes have a bomb shelter and waited, as we knew that the drones fired by Iran and are quite slow traveling were headed towards Israeli sovereign territory. A very, very tense night, a sleepless night. However, we are now off that emergency footing. And as you can imagine, we are much, much, much more relieved, and life has gone back to normal. We now wait to see what kind of retaliation Israel will undertake.
But in terms of the people, help me feel the pulse of the people there in Israel. How has this impacted, for instance, daily life, businesses, or even public activities right there in Israel as a result of these attacks?
Well, Israel is a country that has been at war with Hamas following the atrocities of the 7th of October, which are sponsored by Iran. Iran effectively has been attacking Israel for decades through its proxies, Hezbollah in the north, Hamas in the south, and through the Houthis, who have disrupted the shipping lines, which has led to an impact on the cost of living around the world. So we are still feeling the effects of the Iranian sponsorship. Just a short while ago, Hezbollah fired more rockets and more anti-tank missiles towards Israeli positions in the north. So as far as our daily routine is concerned, we still feel the impact of Iran. We are also waiting for the return of 133 hostages still being held in Gaza by Hamas, who are an Iranian proxy. So this affects our daily life. We are still a country very much on the 7th of October. But what happened on Saturday night was absolutely unprecedented. This is the first time in decades that Iran has attacked us, not through their proxies, but directly. And Israelis now will demand some kind of response from Israel. This is the Middle East. And the only language that seems to count here is a show of force. So Israelis very, very much aware that this is a breaking of strategy by not going through proxies. And right now, there is a lot of discussion in Israel how best, when to retaliate.
Well, while that conversation is ongoing, I'm wondering what security, like there, has there been any beef up in security? What steps have been taken to ensure safety and security of people down there in Israel?
That's a very, very important question. Israelis yesterday were informed that we could come off our emergency footing. The schools were closed yesterday and today. The Israeli week is from Thursday to Sunday, and schools will go back tomorrow. But all precautions were taken to ensure the safety of Israeli citizens. Gatherings were restricted, and any educational events were completely cancelled. This has come to an end now. However, we still have the ongoing situation in the north, where we have over 100,000 of our citizens who have been internally displaced as a result of ongoing attacks coming from Iranian-sponsored proxy Hezbollah. So where I am in the center of the country and in places like Jerusalem and Tel Aviv, life has pretty much gone back to normal, albeit now with an awareness that we have seen a change coming from Iran and concerns for any future attacks coming from the Iranians.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I wish you safety down there. Rolling Mark, Israeli broadcast journalist. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much.
The Ethiopian government has enacted a pivotal policy shift, opening previously protected commercial sectors to foreign investment. This strategic move, articulated in the directive chaired by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, aims to invigorate the nation's productivity and competitive stance in the global market. The purpose of this policy was to support the growth of domestic investors, both qualitatively and quantitatively, and their integration into the global trade value chain. Ultimately, it's aimed to shift them towards value-added investment. The preamble of this directive, issued by the Ethiopian Investment Board and chaired by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, stated that the policy objective has not been met on the scale anticipated. This is due to the long period since policy implementation began and because the protected sectors have faced complaints about service-rich, quality, efficiency, and increasing trend of illegal practices. The Nigerian Naira started the week steady at 1,120 Naira per US dollar on the black market, but the analysts predict it will strengthen across all markets this week. This follows a positive close on Friday, where the official rate reached a 4-month high of 1,142.38 per dollar. This significant gain, representing a 7.72% increase, is attributed to a surge in dollar supply at the Nigerian Autonomous Foreign Exchange Market, rising 124% to $281.34 million compared to the previous week. The combined strength of the official rate and black market stability suggests a potential week of continued appreciation for the Naira. And now to sports stories. The Super Eagles of Nigeria will take on the Squirrels of Benin Republic in 2026 FIFA World Cup qualifying match day for fixture at the neutral venue of Felix Houphouët-Boigny Stadium in Abuja, Ivory Coast in June. Benin's national team have been forced to play this home game at a neutral site after their own stadia were deemed substandard by FIFA. Interestingly, the Felix Houphouët-Boigny Stadium holds familiar territory for the Super Eagles, who played 3 games at this very ground during the 2023 Africa Cup of Nations earlier this year. Prior to the clash with Benin, the Nigerian side would host Bafana Bafana of South Africa on Friday, June 7th, in another crucial World Cup qualifier. The Super Falcons of Nigeria will kick off their campaign at the 2024 Olympic Games in women's football with a mouth-watering clash against Brazil on Thursday, 25th of July. This Group C encounter is scheduled to take place at the Stade Mont-Atlantique in Bordeaux, with kickoff set for 6 p.m. Nigerian time. Randy Waldrum's side would then face a stern test against reigning world champion Spain in their second group game on Saturday, July 28th at the Stade de la Beaujeu in Nantes. This match will also commence at 6 p.m. Nigerian time. The 3-time African champions will round off their group stage commitments against Japan 3 days later, also at the Stade de la Beaujeu, with kickoff slated for 4 p.m. Nigerian time. French President Emmanuel Macron, for the first time, says the Paris Olympics opening ceremony could move from the River Seine to the National Stadium in the event of a security threat. Macron said instead of teams sailing down to the Seine on barges, The ceremony could be limited to the Trocadero building across the river from the Eiffel Tower or even move to the Stade de France. The Paris organizers have devised a ceremony that is unprecedented in the Olympic history as it breaks from the tradition of the Games opening in the main stadium. But with the Olympics taking part with the war raging in Ukraine and in Gaza, the ceremony also leaves teams potentially vulnerable to attack. French authorities have, for example, mentioned the possibility of an attack by drone.
Vous retrouvez autour de la table avec ceux contre lesquels vous avez combattu. Et donc c'est aussi en cela que l'olympisme apporte d'un point de vue diplomatique beaucoup de choses. Et au-delà de l'expérience très humaine que David Douillet vient de décrire, on va aussi tout faire pour avoir une trêve olympique. On fera une analyse en temps réel et donc on a une cérémonie, pour tout vous dire, hein, on a une cérémonie qu'on prépare qui serait limitée au Trocadéro par exemple. Et donc on ne ferait pas toute la scène si on se dit, si l'analyse permettait de...
S'il faut restreindre le lieu.
Exactement. Voire qui rapatrierait dans le Stade de France. Et donc on est au rendez-vous de cette exemplarité.
And that's all on the news. But before we go, let's take a look again at some of the major stories. Organized labor has submitted fresh proposal, demanded 615,000 new minimum wage. Nigeria's inflation has increased to 33.2% in March. Standoff has continued in Rwanda as lawmakers prepare to vote on deportation bill. Send your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number on the screen and follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can watch us live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV and YouTube. Many thanks for watching. I am Adebola Adedugba.